how I've been keeping sane during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's a technique called Personal Kanban. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but what I want to do today is introduce three things to you. The first, what it is for anyone that doesn't know what it is, what are the benefits and some pretty amazing benefits that you can achieve through Personal Kanban, and third, how am I actually using it? So how am I applying it to the way that I'm working and keeping sane and keeping productive during COVID-19? So let's start off. How does Personal Kanban work? Well, it's a very simple process. It has just two rules. The first is visualize your work, and I'll give you an example of this in a moment. And the second one is limit your work in progress. It sounds simple because it is, but it's not necessarily easy in terms of how do you implement it and how do you incorporate it into your day-to-day work. So I'm going to step you through how it works in practice, both in theory, but also then how I'm applying it. So the first one is visualize your work. So example I've got here is a real life example of how I managed the process of moving my life with my family from Melbourne back up to Brisbane. And so you can see we've used the simple post-it note system with to do, doing, and done. We brainstormed all the different tasks that we needed to do in order to move, and then we're able to do so with a lot less stress and able to focus on just relocating our entire lives. So that's the first one, visualize your work. Just get what's in your head out onto whether it's post-it notes, whether it's your trusty old notepad, and applying these rules to how you use Personal Kanban, maybe with a to-do list, or it could be through your calendar, like whether it's your Google Calendar, whether it's your Microsoft Office, putting an electronic system in place. So I used to use a all-day event where I put my to-do list in there, and then various techniques of how I managed it. So that's the first rule. The second is limit your work in progress. So if you choose to have the physical version with post-it notes, you can apply a work in progress limit, a WIP limit. And this is how many tasks are you going to do at one time. Now, if you're using your notepad example, I'd recommend just doing one thing at a time. Obviously, that's the ideal goal. And there's different ways that you can approach that to make that realistic. The other thing to be conscious of with limiting your work in progress, particularly now that we're all working remotely, is what distractions do you have in place, more so on your computer rather than with the family maybe being at home and having to deal with homeschooling kids. Do you need to close a number of browser tabs? Do you need to close the number of applications or notifications do you get? Limit your work in progress in that way. So that's Personal Kanban in a nutshell. Just two simple rules: visualize your work and limit your work in progress. So what are some of the benefits of using Personal Kanban? Why should you think about incorporating this way of working into how you work on a day-to-day basis? Well, the benefits are pretty impressive, and they get even more impressive when I talk to the time-saving benefits. But to start off with, it helps you improve your planning. You actually get everything that you're trying to think about up in here out onto paper with a post-it note or with your notepad or in your calendar. It helps you increase your focus. So particularly when we've got so many distractions going on, both physically, but also, we've got a pandemic and there's the health concern there, like people are anxious about that. So having a way of trying to refocus yourself on what are you planning on doing, Personal Kanban can really help with that. As I mentioned, it helps you reduce context switching. So if you focus on one task at a time, then you're avoiding all those different notifications. There's different applications. I shut down Slack as an example when I need to focus on something. It helps you reduce all that context switching because you're trying to limit your progress and work on one thing at a time. And by able to visualizing your work, you're actually able to prioritize your work more effectively because you can think more critically, what is the most important thing for you to be doing right now? Not always the most urgent thing, particularly as we've gone through this crisis. There's been a lot of things that we've had to respond to. For myself, managing a team, there's a number of things that I had to respond to, whether it was maybe the health concern of the individual team or managing our work. A lot of what we've had to do is be responsive, and it doesn't help you getting out of that frame of mind into proactive unless you have a structured way of doing that. And Personal Kanban really helps with that, getting out of reactive and moving into that proactive mindset so you can actually do what is important. So it helps you with that prioritization. So all of these benefits combined, I found that this technique alone can create up to 60 days of increased productivity per year. So you might be asking, how does that work? Well, as simple as starting each and every day with 10 minutes of planning out what your day is going to be looking like, writing up your new post-it notes or writing your to-do list. That 10-minute exercise can save you 1 to 2 hours per day in execution, because you're no longer having to think about what you need to work on. It's already written down. You've planned out what you need to work on and you prioritized it. And by limiting your work in progress, you're focused. So if you think about that on a broader scale, 1 to 2 hours per day adds up to, say, about roughly a day per week. Multiply that by a year, that's where you can save up to 60 days of lost productivity time because you're using a technique that helps you become more effective and more efficient with your time. So that's pretty awesome. So what I'm going to do now is talk to you in practical sense, how I've used Personal Kanban during COVID-19 to keep myself sane, keep myself away from all the multiple distractions going on, either at home or the things I've had to respond to. I've got 3 girls, one which was being homeschooled, 2 are quite young. So there was lots of distractions in my house, but I've used Personal Kanban in order to stay focused and know what I need to work on. So how does it work for me? Well, I've gone back to the trusty old notepad, and the reason why is because there's so much information going on about what we need to focus on. There's information about what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, how you need to look after your mental health, what you need to be doing to exercise, all these different things, information overload. Plus, if you're feeling anxious about the pandemic, there's so much. So I just went back to basics, and I guess the sense of satisfaction of crossing something off physically on a notepad, that worked well for me. So that's where I started. But then, as you can see on screen, that's where I started to add a bit of technique to it. So first off, each day I have a goal, and that could be just a goal for that day. Like, what's the most important thing that I want to get achieved? Or it could be like, I need to get through, say, a volume of activities per day. So for me, in my role, involves keeping in contact with our clients. So making sure that I'm keeping in regular contact with them, making sure that they're all okay, they're healthy and safe, and that they've got all the information they need from us in whatever that might be, whether it's consulting work that we're doing as an example. So 1 goal per day. The next is the to-do list. So I write a new to-do list each and every day. And that to-do list will have tasks from 1 minute through to an hour. So the idea of being able to limit my work in progress and get stuff done each and every day. And again, sense of satisfaction, I cross it off that list. I then sophisticate a little bit more by grouping activities together. So say if I need to send multiple emails at one time, I'll try and group those together and focus on that task at one time. If it's writing reports or multiple reports, I'll group that exercise together. So the idea is that you're avoiding context switching even in the type of task that you're doing. And then the next level that I go to is then planning out my day via my calendar, so online. And so, as you imagine, like many of us, we have a number of meetings. The number of meetings has increased as we've gone to virtual. A lot of Zoom calls or Google Hangouts for us. But in between those, that's where I'm using blocks of time to have focused time. So I will literally, if I need to send out multiple emails, block out time on my calendar. If I need to write a report, block out time on my calendar. So I'm using the rules of Personal Kanban and how I'm working. I'm visualizing my work through this notepad and limiting my work in progress by blocking out time and using that to keep effective. So today, We've talked about a number of ways that you can use Personal Kanban to keep yourself sane during this COVID-19 pandemic, and obviously thinking for the longer term beyond that. I've introduced 3 things today. What is Personal Kanban? Why you should care about it, in terms of the amazing time-saving benefits that it can give you, up to 60 days per year in increased productivity. That's pretty awesome. Like, who doesn't want to be that much more productive? It'll make you stand out. And then finally, how I'm applying it. So simple to do list in a notepad with goals, grouping of tasks, using calendar to time box my time. So all of this technique together has helped me just to stay sane during COVID-19 and take back control of my day, because that's been really important, having something that I can control. So my final thought for you today with using Personal Kanban is take control of your day. Don't let it control you.
That was fantastic, and something that we can all apply to our daily routine at home. And you can see why Ryan has been nominated as a finalist for the Outstanding Leadership Awards. Having techniques like that for the home activity means that he is obviously super efficient at home. Are there any questions or any discussion points that you guys would like to have around the topic that Ryan presented to us before we move to the next one? So I think, Arthur, you're on. You got your mic on. I think it looks like you're talking, but you're muted. Okay.
No, that's just I do that all the time.
No worries at all.
I don't need an audience to talk.
No worries. Okay, well, let's move on to the next one then. So the next one is what I'm doing is I'd like to present to you a better way to do your gardening projects, which looks at the first principle of the Agile Manifesto, which is iterative delivery. Okay, let me get that one up and running for you guys. Can everyone see that screen? Good. And I think, and also, can you see my face there as well? I'm not sure if that's...
Sure can.
Okay, cool, excellent. All right, so as we go about delivering our lean and agile projects, we think about such advanced topics as cycle time optimization. It's easy to forget that most of the world, and certainly much of Brisbane, still operates on the paradigm that projects generally have one date when the product is made available to its users. Fellow Agilists, my name is John Stathakis, and the purpose of my presentation today is to get back to basics, to describe how this came to be the dominant model and why it's so important that we move beyond it. Can you think of the last garden project that you undertook? Or if gardening is not your thing, the last project that you executed. This could be as simple as a new flower bed, or as complex as the delivery of the International Space Station. So some of you may remember the good old days before structured project management. People used to do just what they thought was best and then suffer the consequences as they went. A gardening project might have gone something like this. Someone would have an idea that a garden would be good. After a few quick measurements, the family would head down to Bunnings and buy some raw materials, picking up ideas as to what might work better, and then figuring it all out as they got back home. While this approach works for the smallest projects, anything beyond the trivial becomes unworkable. The wood may be cut too short and not fit the frame. The irrigation system might not fit the tap, and the pipes might be different sizes to the hoses, etc. It was only in the 1950s that work started to formalize a structured project management process to develop solutions. Today, we think of this process having distinct stages. So stages such as imagine, build, plan, test, deploy, and then operate. An example of this is the waterfall process that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, where you go through requirements, design, development, test, and deploy. And these have been applied across most industries in the world and at the moment are delivering most products. So when you think of your last garden project, how did you go about it? Without realizing it, you might have followed the structured approach to your project. Let me explain. Your partner may have said, would it be nice to have a vegetable garden? We have the space at the back. If you're an audit thinker, you might have suggested that we need to work out in detail what the garden would look like and what materials need to be purchased to complete the garden, including all of the pipes for the irrigation system and the netting and frame for the canopy. You may have made detailed drawings on paper to show how each part would fit together. After the one trip to Bunnings, you assemble the bits and then put them into place. After planting some seeds, you may have proudly displayed your completed garden to your partner and enjoyed some good veggies together for months to come. Of course, this approach has a much better chance of success than the chaos that I described previously. So, how did it go? Can you remember? Research suggests that for the majority of projects run in this way, there are still significant challenges. It's not saying it's a bad approach. It's just that the field has evolved and that we now have different approaches that are normally more suited. Have a look at this picture. Does it look familiar? The path to the end result is often far more convoluted than you could have ever have imagined. So what could go wrong, you ask? One way to distinguish agile thinkers from traditional ones is to ask the question, what could we have done better? Traditional thinkers will most often say, we could have planned better. Can we blame lack of planning for all issues that come up? Can we say that we did not ask the right questions? You should have asked your neighbor because he feels out of the loop and is upset that there are now more birds in the area. You may have discovered halfway through that it was too much work after all and that you really don't have time to complete it. You may discover that it looks horrible in the backyard and blocks the path that the dog likes to run. You might have discovered that the possums are able to get through the netting and that you can't find a good way to keep them out. Or you may have found that you have just created a lifelong commitment to keeping it going, and it's much easier to support your local grocer who has better produce anyway. I've been a project manager for some large projects, and it may surprise you that these are the types of issues that most projects experience. The key is that it's good to discover issues early rather than at the end when you've spent all of the time and money that you wanted to put into this thing. You don't know how something is going to turn out until it's actually used, and often in ways that you never anticipated. Did you know that the first product ever sold on eBay was a broken laser pointer? The CEO of eBay even phoned up the customer to let them know that the product was broken. Turns out the customer knew. He was a collector of broken laser pointers. True story. We also end up building things that no one ends up using. For example, we could have spent a lot of time building little fences between the different crop types, only to find that they are not helpful and just get in the way when the garden is up and running. You may say that since issues like this are normal, can there be a better way? It's true that you can't magically remove these issues, but that you can find out about them earlier and you can get benefits before the end of the project. Look at this diagram. It shows two ways of painting a picture. Either you could do it in modules, or you can do a rough sketch and then refine as you go. The second approach has a number of advantages. If you run out of time or resources, you have a working picture that can be used. You may even discover that step 2 is good enough for your end goal and no need to move to step 3. Your audience might get an early indication of what you have in mind and make more meaningful contributions rather than waiting till the end when you can't change anything. So how does this apply to our gardening project? Imagine that this is the end goal you are aiming for. So instead of starting with this, perhaps begin with this. This will allow you to go through the whole process of producing vegetables at minimal cost in time, money, and space. And then, once you've mastered that, you can move on to this. Notice that here you have 3 times the scale of the previous step, 3 times the real estate, 3 times as many types of vegetables, and a more robust architecture. And when you're comfortable with the process, then increasing the scale for the next step, perhaps even adding in netting to keep the possums away, or adding in an irrigation system. At each stage, you'll learn something about gardening and what works and what does not, and whether the effort to continue is worth it. These principles apply equally to massive projects as they do to little ones. One example is the 2008 Qantas JetSmart project. Qantas spent $40 million trying to build a solution that was going to provide a parts management system for the company's airline mechanics. Instead of delivering a small subset of the solution and testing it with end users, they specified and built what they thought the business would need. The result was that the system was so difficult to use that the mechanics refused to use it. Qantas had to spend an additional 3 years delivering a new replacement system. It's not to say that you don't need to envisage, plan, build, test, deploy, and operate. It's just that each iteration is small enough to give you a good taste of what the bigger picture involves, allowing you to prepare in a way that carries far less risk. Of course, there are more effective ways than doing these steps in sequence, but that is a topic for another talk. It's easier to look back on a project and think that it would have been more efficient if we just built the damn thing rather than going through the torturous path to get there. However, the future is more tricky than you think. Conditions change, and you don't know what you'll need until you are there. 3 months ago, I would have thought that cruise ships were a fantastic business model. I don't think that anymore. Some of the world's biggest systems have been built with this in mind. Remember the first version of Google Search? While all of their competitors like Yahoo and Alta Vista and Lycos had lifestyle portals with everything that they thought people would need, Google provided a box to type in and a search button to push. I think we know who won in the end. Fellow Agilists, I imagine that the need to deliver in an iterative way as opposed to big bang is bread and butter to your daily lives, but it pays to go back to basics and re-establish a firm baseline. As to why such concepts as iterative delivery to production is so important, especially since much of Brisbane's industry still delivers projects once at the end. By breaking down your need into smaller portions that deliver real value at each step, you're more likely to deliver a solution with less waste and is a better fit for your organization, such as your family needing a garden. How are you going to run your next project? Are there any questions?
Hi, John. One thing that occurred to me was some of my experience in scientific research, which tends to be big and chunky, and there's an increasing emphasis on saying beforehand what you're going to do before you do anything. Mm-hmm. And pre-registration of research has become very fashionable. Mm. And it gets in the road of some of this stuff. It saves you from some problems of people cooking the books afterwards, which will happen in science. I'd like to say it never happens, but I've seen it happen. Mm. On the other hand, it at least gives people an idea of this is where we're going. Mm. So it had me thinking about different types of projects that when you modularize them, they work really well. And when you were talking about the garden, it immediately had me thinking, geez, I wish I'd done that with my veggie patch.
Sure. So you're saying the question is looking at applying the model to the particular project at hand and saying that some projects lend themselves to having more upfront planning with others. So yes, I agree with that. I guess my appeal is to say that we often assume that we need to apply an all upfront planning with a single delivery date approach to more projects than we actually do need to. And even when you look at things like system replacement, that becomes such an important, people look and say, well, you can only really replace it when you've built up everything that that the old system had that you're replacing, and only then can you switch over, which implies that you have to do some sort of a big bang at that point. Now, the appeal here is to say that it's important to look for things such as establishing coexistence early on, because once you've got that, then you're able to deliver what you've got in small pieces. Now, in terms of the funding question, of course, it's important to be able to lay out as much detail as one can in order to achieve funding for something. The trick is not to necessarily be locked into that to the extent that you can't pick up on opportunities that come along the way. So in other words, once you've established that funding and then maybe a month later you have something that the board would be very much keen on taking advantage of, that you're not hamstrung by the fact that you've locked it in early, that you can't take advantage of that.
Yep.
So it's having the mechanism to be able to change direction quickly, and obviously with executive stakeholder buy-in to doing that. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It was just reminding me of that particular challenge. As I said, this is something I have in my background working with scientists, and each research project is kind of like a module, but it's a chunky module. It's they're often quite substantial. One of the things while you were talking, it occurred to me that one of the things you can do is lots of research has multiple stages, and let's do module by module within those within that particular project. We planned it out this way, and let's announce, okay, we've had to change here. So I think there's even ways of adapting something like that.
Sure. Okay. So so any further questions, or can we move to the next item? Okay, so so next up we've got Arthur Poporat, who is going to give us a highly interactive session introducing the nominal group process. I've been looking forward to this segment. Arthur's an independent consultant whose career combines practical experience in organizational management and development with research on personality, education, learning, and performance. He's been featured in the New York Times, the Huffington Post, and Time. Arthur's current projects include writing about people and performance, developing tailored personality assessments, and facilitating team development. Arthur is also a co-organizer of the Brisbane Agile Meetup group. So if you can put your hands up for a warm welcome to Arthur. I think since I've seen used in other ones, and Alex has got the hand icon.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks,
Over
Alex.
to you, Arthur.
Okay. When John invited me to run a session as part of this lightning session workshop, I was thinking, what can I do in 15 minutes with people? And what came back to me was something from my background in group facilitation. I have a background in organisational change and organisational development, part of which involved training up a lot of group facilitators. And one of the things I'm working on at the moment is a book on how you run groups and run processes that came straight out of that early experience of working with facilitators. There was a question they asked me very early on in my career, and I've been asked it a number of times since, of if there was one process, one tool that you were going to teach people that they really needed to know above all others, what would that be? And that's the one I'm going to be talking about this evening. It's something with a horrible title. It's called Nominal Group Process or Nominal Group Technique. And there is a reason why it's called that, which I'll explain shortly. The reason you would use Nominal Group Technique, I'll just explain a little bit about the background. It did actually come out of process management and project management type environments. Well, one of the problems that they found, and it's a common problem that we have in organisations or projects or activities, no matter what, is it's really common to have someone who happens to be the really dominant person that takes over the talk, or other people feeling like, I might have an idea, but maybe I can't really share it at this point. Maybe it's just not good enough. And the advantage of using this particular process is it allows and encourages everybody to have a say, at the same time as it discourages people from just taking over. One of my teachers from way back when used to talk about coming up with processes that were genius proof. All of us have heard of things that are idiot proof. Well, I used to work with for the Endeavour Foundation, and there are people at Endeavour Foundation that are unkindly described as idiots, and they're not. But then their intelligence levels aren't the same as the people that are online here today. They will not mess you around the way a genius will. A genius is someone who comes up with creative ways of doing things that make things go wrong. Nominal group process or nominal group technique is one of those ones that even a genius struggles to mess this one up. So it's a highly robust process. So I've talked about it so far. Before we go any further, I'm going to run it. I'm going to get the bunch of you to take part in a nominal group process on a particular topic. So to make this work, I need all of you to bring up your chat screen. So are you familiar with how to pull up chat? We've already had some chat with a bunch of people while John was talking. So make sure you bring up your chat screen. Now you'll notice on the chat screen, there's a thing where it says send to every, you can choose who you're sending it to. Make sure you're sending it to everyone. And there's also a box where you can type in something, but it doesn't get sent to the rest of us until you click send. So I want you to keep in mind not to send anything. I'm going to get you to type something in there shortly, but not to send anything until I say so. So is that clear? Cool. So I'm going to ask you a question. It's a very agile focused question, which is, if you were talking to somebody who'd never been working with Agile before, and you wanted to tell them this is the thing that you the things that you really want them to know about Agile, what are those things? So get in your mind, what are the things that you'd be going, yes, this is really important about Agile. If someone is completely new to this, they really need to know this and this and this. Okay? So does everybody have that in their head of what are some of those things that they would be saying about Agile? I want you to choose your top one and type it into that box. I'll give people a few seconds to type it up. And I'm assuming everybody's typed something in. What I want you to do is, on the count of 3, everybody click send. 1, 2, 3, send. Okay. I was joking with John earlier that we'll see if we can break Zoom, but I don't think we've managed to do that. But we've got a bunch of different ideas there. So what I would like you to do now is to scroll over those responses. It starts with Ivan mentioning collaboration, and there's Sandra mentioned iterative product as a big win, etc., etc. So scroll over those, have a look at what's up there, and what I want you to do now is think of the other things that came into your head when you were talking about, or you're thinking about, what's the most important thing about Agile? What was in your head that hasn't appeared on the screen already? And you've got to come up with something. If all your ideas are already on the screen in the chat line, you're going to have to come up with something else anyway. So type that into the chat box. Don't send it yet. Okay, everybody ready to send? 1, 2, 3, send. Okay. Now, what I would like you to do at this point, it'd be really cool if you could unmute yourselves and comment on what you've seen appear on the screen.
There's a lot of common thought. I think it's come through.
A lot of common thought?
Yeah, but
Yeah, very much.
So what are the common themes that you're saying?
iteration.
Yep.
People, teamwork.
A lot of it's about interpersonal communication.
Interpersonal communication. What else is coming up in terms of some of the themes?
Honesty.
Honesty.
Yeah.
So
Early
then,
communication.
sorry, I missed that last bit.
Sorry, honesty and early communication.
Honesty and early communication. Yeah, not waiting for things to spill out to the point where it's become a major problem. It's dealt with quickly. Okay, so I'm going to pause this at the moment and just go back over the process that we've just been through. As I said, what I was going to take you through is nominal group process. And we've just been through a nominal group process. And hopefully, John, unfortunately, I'm running this off my iPad and I don't know how to copy it onto something where I can print it off. But it'd be really cool if we can keep a record of what people added in there.
Yeah, no, I've got a full record here.
Cool. Why it's called nominal group technique or nominal group process is that you may have noticed that while people were typing in their things or thinking about stuff, that we were a group, but we were a group in name only. So it's a nominal group. What happens is that this is an opportunity for people to retreat within themselves, to get some ideas for themselves as to how they would respond to a particular question without any interference from somebody else. Normally, if I was running this within a room, I would go from person to person to person. So the way my screen's organised, I'd go to John, and then I'd ask Brad, and then I'd ask Craig, and then I'd ask Michelle, and so on, but get one item at a time from each person. And by doing that, that forces everybody to both contribute something, but also to hear what everybody else has said. And over time, this means that the group comes to share their understanding one with another. I have seen a nominal group process go wrong, but it really took some major effort and some very combative behaviour by somebody. Most groups where things aren't just completely falling apart, nominal group will work even with some really ordinary interpersonal behaviour. You can normally get everybody's ideas out and open for people to discuss them very, very quickly. And once they're on a board, or in this case on a chat line, you've got something that you can then start using as the basis for the next bit of discussion. So one of the things we could do at this point is to follow up that first discussion about what you would like people to know about Agile. We could follow it up with what are the techniques that are going to contribute to that, and so on, and so on. It just becomes a very straightforward and very robust way of getting information from people very, very quickly in a whole bunch of different settings. I've never tried running nominal group process online before, but I was entirely confident this beastie was going to work, partly because I'm confident of the goodwill in the room, but even if there wasn't that much goodwill, this process still works. What are people's comments or reactions to that process that we just went through?
Well, I think if you look at all of the comments that people have put for each of those, it does provide quite a good description of the key things in Agile, the main things, and the frequency by which certain ideas have come up is also in proportion to the importance of that particular thing to Agile. That's my observation.
The thing I love too, Arthur, it gives everyone a voice, whereas in many situations, not everyone has a voice in group work.
My opinion is that it gives also perspective. I mean, it's wide our own perspective with other people's perspective. Yeah, so it kind of because based on our own experiences and maybe background and profession, we tend to see maybe just as an engineer. Yeah, everything we try to explain everything from the engineering point of view. Someone more related to business or marketing or market studies or economy will see a different angle, and that will kind of give us more. I mean, we widen our own knowledge and our own, and we can continue building on that.
Cool.
I've tried the same exercise 2 days ago with a bunch of Brazilians, and I've just sent you a link. It's called Mentimeter. So basically you just prepare a question and people click on the link and they type their answer, and then you have live appearing this word cloud, and you have a visual. It's fun.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Is that a free software too, Sandra?
I don't know.
Yes,
I see pricing there, but
it is free. That I've used that for a design thinking session to the Project Management Institute.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's really
yeah,
cool.
you do have a free account creation thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
powerful.
so
It does comes with a free account, but it comes with limited functionality. Like you can only have 3 questions in the free account.
Okay.
I'm wondering about the variety of uses you might pull this out for.
Well, for myself, I've used this often just to get ideas from around the room, particularly like I would sooner use nominal group technique to brainstorming, especially with a group of people where there are a lot of introverts in the room. I would far sooner use nominal group process than brainstorming. You try running brainstorming with a group of introverts and you get an exhausted facilitator and not a lot of outcome. Whereas with nominal group, because they're getting to see each other's ideas, if you encourage them to then build from them, you start getting some of that creativity. I've seen it used, to tell the truth, I've used it in situations where teams are in the midst of significant conflict as a way of getting people to focus on a common question in a way in which they feel that they have a voice, but they're also feeling like they're going to be heard. One other thing that occurs to me in terms of a different way in which you can use this process, with a really large group, so like I have run something that looks a little bit like nominal group with groups of 50 and 100 people. And I didn't go person to person around the room, because if you do that, people are just getting bored really, really quickly. What I did instead was split them up into small groups and got them to run nominal group within the group, and then got the groups to report back. So it was like a multi-level nominal group process. This basic process, I can give you the name of the person who first called it nominal group process, but it's actually one of the most ancient processes that you could come across. The old talking stick method is not that far removed from nominal group process. But what makes it robust is that people know that they will get heard, and they know that they will get their turn to speak. Right? It forces people into that process in a way that doesn't feel all that forced. So that's the reason why, when I thought, yeah, if there was one thing that I was going to make sure every facilitator on the planet knew about, it'd be nominal group process. It's because it is so robust and it is so flexible. As I say, I've taught, getting back to your question again, Craig, I have actually tied nominal group process with a bunch of creativity techniques or a bunch of planning techniques. In effect, things like planning poker are not that far removed from nominal group process.
It's such a powerful tool to incorporate in so many different things that we can use in the future.
Yeah, because I think the retrospective process, or the retro, it's really cool for that too.
Yeah,
people that chance to think.
Yeah,
a big advantage I see in this type of process is that expedites the flourishing of new ideas, and because kind of having 100 people giving different perspective can make it flourish better. Yeah, kind of extracting the best from the whole idea, from the whole bunch of ideas in a quick way, expediting it.
And the other thing is that when you have sorry.
No, go for it, Sandra.
You speak. When you realize that you're not alone, sometimes you have common ideas that appear. I find it very somehow cheerful as well, Oh, I'm not the only one. A lot of people have the same idea, and that is reassuring. It's validating for you as well to feel that, if you're an introvert, if you're shy, someone else is, it's great to create this interaction. Sorry.
And very much so with people having the same ideas presented at the same time means that you don't get swayed by whoever's the most vocal in the room.
Yes.
That we don't all end up following that person.
One thing that I just thought about while Ivan was talking earlier, I mentioned before that I've seen it used in conflict situations. One thing that I can remember, one of my mates has used a number of times. When there's a group where there's a lot of tension, say that there's something like an unpopular manager or an unpopular person in the room, or there's an issue that everybody is treating like that's the dead dog in the room that nobody's going to mention. What Bob would do is he would run a nominal group, but the way he would run it was he would hand out to people cards on which they could write their comments. One comment per card. All the cards got put into the middle of the room, which only Bob would read. So no one could guess whose handwriting this was. I'm sure there is software where you could do the same sort of thing. But what that allowed people to do was to say those unmentionable things that was weighing on their heads. And it allowed them, as a consequence, to start talking about it, because it's finally been mentioned, it's out there on the table, and we can now start talking about it without saying, oh, it was, well, how dare John for bringing that up? Right, it's out there. So, but that does require that the confidentiality is supported. What Bob does is he retains those cards and destroys them, so that there's no chance that anybody can come back and go, oh, so-and-so was the one who dobbed everybody in.
And probably even if they reword it as well, so that you don't recognize the kind of words that certain people would use.
Yeah, actually, thanks for the reminder. Yes, you're right, that is one of the things Bob would do. He would paraphrase it, because for exactly that reason, that anybody who knows me well enough will pick up some of my speech patterns. Oh, that must have been Arthur who said that one. And if instead it's reported back in an unusual way, it's still the issue, but it's not clearly traceable back to me. And it's a really effective way of freeing people up to start talking about the dead dog in the room.
And that supports Brad's statement earlier that this is really good technique for retrospectives.
Yep. So the reason I wanted to, those years back, when I first said, yes, listen, if you only know one tool, know this one. And the reason why I wanted to use it here or talk about it here is it's both really robust, but it's also really powerful and flexible. You can use it in multiple different ways. And if you think about some of the techniques you're already using, like Brad mentioned a bit about retrospective, yeah, people are effectively using something like nominal group. If people are in conflict, yeah, people often use something like nominal group. In a way, a well-done Scrum relies on people doing something a bit like nominal group. It's really important to use just that basic process and remind people of, if you're running a Scrum, for example, gee, we haven't heard from Joe for a while. It's time to hear from Joe. Let's force that into, we're going to make sure everybody gets a say. So that's me for this evening. I hope that's been helpful, at least as a reminder, because at one level, I'm sure you all know this, but this is something just to remind you, this one is the building block of at least half of the processes that we use in group facilitation, and I suspect a lot more.
Thanks, Arthur.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Arthur.
That's really an amazingly powerful approach, and I think its powers in its simplicity. So I'll definitely be using that one a lot in the future. So that brings us to the end of today's presentations. So thank you all for spending the time this evening with us. Don't forget to attend the next virtual Lean Coffee, which is advertised on the Agile Meetup site. The next one's Friday the 5th of June at 8 AM. Well worth going to. And also to look out for the next monthly presentation. So the next one's on the 18th of June, and we've got Nick Takavadi lined up, and he's going to take us through the Agile oxymoron, which will describe 7 lessons Agile practitioners can learn from the art of hosting, which is an approach to leadership. Look out for the event details on Meetup, so I'll send those out over the course of the next week. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that one. So you're welcome to stay online for a few minutes if you want to have any additional post-meeting chat. And really great to see you guys here, and looking forward to catching up with you at the next one. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, John. Thank you for organising.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Arthur. Thanks, John.
Sure.
Thank you guys for coming along, and also to Arthur for presenting.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of the possums. I didn't know about them. They ate all my tomatoes. There's none of them in France. Do.
And thanks, Brad, for your kind comment as well.
No problem. Thanks, guys. We'll see
Sorry,
you soon.
I have a question for Arthur.
Yes?
Yes. Where can I learn more about this nominal process if I would like to learn a bit more about it?
Well, a couple of things. One of the things that I'll do is I'll send on to John so that he can distribute through the meetup a summary of nominal group process that I prepared. And as I mentioned before, I am working on a book of different processes that hopefully in the next 2 or 3 months will be available online.
Excellent. Thank you, Arthur.
But in the short run, I'll send something off to John.
Great. I'll distribute.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Cheers.
guys.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Oh, yep, not muted. John, thanks for organising. Thanks for inviting a Southerner to come along.
No, absolutely. You're most welcome.
They lead us to having the first world product day
what happened there?
Thanks, Simon. No, you're most welcome, and we do these monthly. I think one of the advantages of it being online is that we don't have to be confined to Brisbane.
Yeah, that's right. I'm also, because I'm checking into a bunch of things, and I'm also enjoying what feels like a quieter, more reflective conversation. Right. Often you go to the meetups and everything's kind of frantic, and there's people at the front going blah 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 at you, but I'm enjoying the quieter nature of some of these things.
No, because it's because we've got guys like Arthur on who are very reflective by nature.
That's right. One of the things, Arthur, when you were talking, is I was reflecting on this has nothing to do with what you were saying, but what you were saying triggered it. What are we optimizing for, right? And this goes back to, are we trying to make the banks more profitable and, all that sort of shit. Because a lot of stuff that's just been kind of talked about, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, has been about giving voice to people that are normally quiet. And when we do that, what are we optimizing for? What are we doing? And I'm not, it's a rhetorical question, right? It's just like to reflect on and think about. I'm watching, there you go.
No, I was just thinking, it is one of those ones that it's a lovely reminder of, okay, what is this about? When I was doing some writing this afternoon, and some of the overview stuff on for this book that I was talking about, of how do you lead into choosing this is the right one to use or not. And one of the things that I was coming back to was, well, you don't really start at the beginning, you start at the end. Where are we wanting to get to? And working back. On the other hand, you need to be careful that your end isn't so big that you get lost in the long term.
Yeah, you don't start at the end though. That's kind of a false sense of confidence in what you're doing, right? You start in the middle.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You don't want the big end.
Yeah.
You want
but you have a goal
the little end.
Sure, but it also depends on how you define what the end is. Because if you say the end is the specific answer to all of the questions that you're asking, is one way of defining the end. The other way is to say that we want to get to consensus and we want to get to shared vision that provides the following benefits and so on, which and then use the process to find out what the consensus is to get to that point.
Yeah. There's something about optimizing for the big outcomes, values, visions, things like that. There's also optimizing for how are we working together, not just today, but for the next 5 minutes.
Right.
What's the goal we have within the next 5 or 10 minutes?
I'm wondering, that's nice, like that different timescales. I'm personally wondering, does democratizing these conversations more powerfully lead to a better world, right? Or doesn't it? Right, that's what I'm wondering about.
Well,
you got me curious. What's bubbling up behind that?
Because, when a year and a half ago, when I left Oracle and started Everest, my motivation for leaving Oracle, because I didn't want to work for one of those mega corporations. They bought the company that I worked for, and I just didn't want to participate in that, right? And as we grow Everest, we're orienting towards kind of SMEs, right, startup and 500 type person organizations, and not really trying to aspire bigger than that, but we'll end up doing it sooner or later. And then we kind of have things we don't do, like we don't go work for gambling companies and stuff like that. But the day will come where we're faced with the opportunity to go work at a bank, and it'll be worth lots of money to me. And I'm like, fine, right? It's part of the economy and the ecosystem that I live in. But are they doing the right thing? right? Or are they actually evil organizations, right? And so given that, right, I'm not here to cast judgment on the people that work at Westpac or ANZ or Suncorp or whatever, because they're just earning their livelihood and so on. But like, the moves I make, are they towards